Since 1911, March 8 has been set aside by the global community to celebrate the International Women's Day. This day honors women, recognizes their achievements, and promotes actions towards gender equality, aiming to create a safer world for all women. This year's theme, Accelerate Action, offers a pathway to celebrate women with disabilities in Nigeria and also advocates for continued investment at the local and global level in inclusive policy for women with disability who have historically been disadvantaged and forgotten in the global discourse of inclusion. The theme also highlights the urgency of taking steps to achieve gender equality and eliminate barriers hindering from women from reaching their full potential. Everyone, everywhere, can play a part in helping afford gender equality. From a wide range of International Women's Day campaigns, events, rallies, lobbies, and performance, to festivals, parties, fun, runs, and celebrations, all International Women's Day activity is valid. That's what makes it International Women's Day so inclusive. Interesting. Joining me in the studio is the Global Secretary of the Network of Women with Disability, Mary Omayeme Victor Magaji. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I hope I pronounced your name well.
No, you didn't, but you're forgiven.
Please forgive me. Thank you so much. Yeah. First of all, happy International Women's Day.
Well, same to you. If you're a he for she, you sound like you're a he for she.
Of course. Okay, so let's just go into it. In your experience, how does being both a woman and having a disability affect your everyday life and your career? Let's start from there first.
Okay, well, it's a play of intersectionalities. Women with disabilities normally are faced with, a double burden in the society, and this stems from the fact that, first of all, we are women, and then secondly, we are individuals with disabilities. And so, the society is still trying to grapple with the complexities of dealing, with disability, especially when it's now combined with, gender, when it has a gender flavor. Yeah. So it affects women with disabilities in different ways. Exclusion in employment, limiting, career opportunities for women, empowerment programs, limited access. And when we talk about access, we're talking about both systemic and infrastructural access. Because a lot of time, a lot of emphasis is placed on infrastructural access. And that has to do with ensuring that buildings, physical buildings, public buildings are accessible, in terms of providing ramps and all that. Exactly. But that's not all that there is to accessibility. What about the system? If I can get into a building, but I cannot get into the system, I'm also limited. You understand? So when we advocate for accessibility, we advocate in both ways. So we want a system, whether it's in the private sector or public sector, we want the system to be accessible in that how inclusive are your policies, for instance, in your workspace, such that a woman with disability can come in and based on her qualification and merits, she can gain employment? Or is your system such that when a woman with disability comes, you're already stereotyping her, you're already like, what is she going to be able to do? You understand? And then when she eventually gets in, you're giving her the job based on sympathy. Understand? Not on her merits. We don't want that. So it just means that the system is not accessible. And then sometimes again, when the woman eventually gets into the job, how accessible are your facilities within the building? I'll give you an example. In my office, there was a particular day I was in the elevator, and the elevator doesn't speak. So I was alone in the elevator this time around, and the elevator just kept going up and down, up and down. Wow. And I was just going everywhere until someone eventually opens the elevator. Like, Mary, how are you doing? I said, I'm here. I've been here for like 3 minutes or more. I said, why? I said, I've been going everywhere because I don't know my floor. You understand? But then if the elevator, for instance, was speaking, say first floor, second floor, I can access it myself. So you see, accessibility is very vast. It's not just being able to access the building.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so, and I think that conversation also has to do with the workings of different organizations, how they are able to put that into play and, of course, implement it. But let's look at today is International Women's Day. And there's been that approach and that call for gender equality. We even talk about the disability part of it, you know, but let's even first talk about the gender equality that has been, you know, highlighted for decades now. How do you think this can be achieved?
Gender equality is, like you rightly said, a fight that has been ongoing. And we, as much as we wish that we could come to an end with this, it looks like the fight is getting even more intense. Take, for example, the National Assembly. There was a time we had 8% representation of, women at the National Assembly. But then with increased advocacy, we now have 3%. So there's a gap there. There's a lacuna there that we're trying to figure out, you know, in the civil society space, in the government, because a lot of times people will tell you, oh, but then the nomination forms are now free. A woman can just go in and pick it. But then I say that it's not just about the financial cost. What about the social cost, right? What about the psychological cost? There are many costs that are involved in a woman getting into the place of leadership. And then getting in there is one thing, sustaining her there is another thing. You understand? I don't want to go into all that we know that is happening right now, you know, in the political space. But we see these things play out, and we know, we just don't want to admit it, that it's not just about the financial cost. And then talking about the inclusion of women with disabilities with regards to gender equality. I don't think that we should make it an afterthought. Women with disabilities are women first, before they had a disability. And disability can be acquired at any point in life. I wasn't born with a disability. I acquired it, you know, along my life's journey, and it could happen to anybody. So we should not be treated as an afterthought. So collaboration is going to be very important. We have to ensure that we are genuinely involved in driving access and inclusion for women, including women with disabilities, understanding the peculiarities that are involved, and navigating ways to ensure that they are brought to the table.
You know, while you were talking, I remember I had a discussion with somebody, and I said that one of the issues I have with women not trying to also take the space is when it comes to, let's say, for example, when it comes to election, electoral time, that's when you see that, you know, politicians come to women and they use them for campaigns, and everybody is just, so, and the women they take it like that. Nobody is trying to have a conversation like, let's have a seat at the table as well. You and I, you know, instead of having to say it's until when it's election time, you'll now be taking me up and down to go and be dancing.
There are two things to that. I understand you perfectly. First of all, that's why we advocate for women empowerment, because if a woman is empowered, there's some rice and beans that would not be attractive to you, right? Because you know your onions, you are empowered, you can go for it. And then when we talk about women representation also, you know, when it's time for elections, I'll give you an example. There was a woman with a disability, Lois Alta, who contested, and she could not secure the seat. I always tell her, though, that she won the process as the first woman who even dared to run for a political office, an elective one. But you see, the system, just like I said earlier, is just inhibiting, right? It's relegating. So the politicians come around and they're like, okay, that's why there is a problem of, shall I say, intentionally disempowering women, so that when they come around, whatever they offer looks attractive. You understand it? So that's what I think that, you know, the game is. But advocacies are ongoing. A lot of advocacy is ongoing. And I know that the paradigm is shifting.
Okay, let's look at the specific barriers that have historically prevented the voices of women with disabilities from being included in the Nigerian society, and how can we effectively dismantle these barriers, particularly in the areas of healthcare, employment, and of course marriage.
When I was giving my introduction, I think I mentioned that there's certain barriers that inhibit women with disabilities particularly. Yeah. And part of it is the negative perception. And this is a cultural barrier. And this prevents a lot of women with disabilities from getting married and having a family life. Why? Because we're still in a country where, unfortunately, people think that if you're a woman with disability, you'll probably be having offsprings with disabilities. Because some people think that disability is genetic. While there are some disabilities that are genetic, not all are genetic. So it behoves on the family to find out, what kind of disability that, the woman has, before. But even if it were genetic, if two people, I believe that if two people are mature enough to come together to say, oh, they want to get married, I don't know why disability should be a problem. Right, you understand? And then talking about dismantling barriers, the attitudinal barriers is going to take a lot of continued sensitization to dismantle it, because Rome was not built in a day, even though they didn't have technology at the time. We have come this far. Things are better than they used to be. At least in Nigeria, we know that there was a time that they were killing people living with albinism, right? And that doesn't really happen as much anymore. So you can see that we are penetrating, but how far we have been able to penetrate is a different topic altogether. And that is why we would need to have some kind of tracking system to track the impact of our advocacy, to ensure that the society is more inclusive and equitable.
Interesting. I think that I like that part where you said that some kind of tracking system, because you just look like there's always the paperwork, and you just sit down there. It doesn't. We don't even know if it's implemented, if it's submitted, and all of those things. And I think that tracking device is actually one of the most important discussions to have. And that brings me to this question: how can organizations create inclusive environments that empower women, majorly with disabilities, to take leadership roles, and what are the support systems that are essential for this to be successful?
Okay, I think that first of all we should have mentorship programs and create some kind of leadership, pathways for women and women with disabilities in workplaces, in political environments, and all that. And by mentorship, I mean that, we can have women who are probably already in leadership positions, or who have been in leadership positions, take on women with disabilities, encourage them, teach them the way, just bring them into the fold, and then pour in the knowledge, the experience that they have. I think this would also help, And then again, in workplaces, for instance, if we can have training programs to first of all educate the employees, the rest of the employees, about the fact that there is a person with disability now in the system, and it doesn't mean that the person is unable, because a lot of time disability is used interchangeably as inability, which is wrong. So it doesn't mean that this person is not capable or less competent than you are, but it just means that the person needs extra support. So if you see the person on the way and there's something, if it's a visually impaired person, something is in their way, you can take it out. You can just render some little support to just ensure that the environment is inclusive, not for you to start distancing yourself and all of those funny things that happen in some environments. I think these are ways that we can help to make our workplaces inclusive. I mean, there are many more, but these are some highlights.
Okay, so lastly, I just want to ask you, I'm very sure you've experienced a lot in terms of how this play out. So in your personal experience, what would you suggest, policies and programs be better designed to ensure that we have women with disabilities included and addressed rather than having them being an afterthought in gender equality initiatives?
So I say that when programs and policies, women with disabilities must be brought to the table, because there is nothing for us without us, and it's he who wears the shoes that knows exactly where it pinches. So you can't just sit there, you don't even know what is happening, but you just have some idea at the top of your head, and then you begin to draft policies that you think are inclusive, but then in practical terms, they are not inclusive. So we advocate that women with disabilities should be brought to. That's why it's important for women with disabilities to be given elective or appointive positions, because it starts from the leadership. We need people to be on the table to design these policies from the outset. And then we need the government to push for the enforcement of the laws that we already have. Of course, we already have the Disability Act, and then it has been domesticated in certain states. We need for the government to be able to push those policies to ensure that the society is more inclusive and equitable. And then I also think that we need to be more collaborative, women with disabilities, with the policymakers, with other members of the civil society organizations, and even with ourselves, as persons with disabilities or women with disabilities. I think with all of this, we should be able to have a long-term solution to exclusion in Nigeria for persons with disabilities.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think one of the submissions I really want to take home is the fact that there needs to be continuous discussion on how to make sure that people with disabilities, majorly women with disabilities, must be brought to the table. Having conversations about, what it's in for them. The system must be able to recognize them.
Imagine if now that we're celebrating International Women's Day, we're also highlighting the achievements of some women with disabilities, or they're getting some awards, or they're honoraries of something. It just helps to encourage and bring them to the spotlight. These are the kind of inclusion we're talking. A lot of times people think that inclusion is one big giant project. It doesn't have to be. It starts with the tiniest things, like recognition, like addressing issues that are just within your capacity to address before we start going to the tall orders.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I really have. Happy International Women's Day again.
Same to you again.
I don't know why you continue saying same to me.
Because you sound like a he for a she.
Yes, I am. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.